Ever received a cold email that actually made an impact? Today's guest did just that. Hi, I'm Jason Andrew, and this is Stark Naked Numbers, the podcast that strips down the numbers of business, investing, and wealth creation to help you become a better entrepreneur, investor, and ultimately build your net worth. Today, I'm joined live in the studio by Simon Plummer, someone who shares a career trajectory similar to mine, an accountant turned business owner with a passion for helping other aspiring business owners. Simon is honestly one of the most exceptional people I've met. We talk about building his operating and leadership chops at Johns Lyng Group, a $1 billion insurance building company he helped scale, through to acquiring a boring brick tool manufacturing business. In this chat, we unpack the art of cold emailing, creative ways to generate deal flow for business acquisitions, lessons learned from starting and operating businesses, and key insights for anyone considering buying into a small business. Alrighty, let's get started. Simon, hi.
Jason, how are you?
Yeah, good. So I was trying to recall how we initially met. And so I was trolling through my inbox last night, my emails, and I found the cold email that you sent me on the 8th of May, 2021, which is just over 3 years ago. And it actually serves as the perfect introduction of you and your journey. So here's what it read. I'm going to read it word for word. G'day, Jason. My name's Simon Plummer, and I'm the owner of BT Engineering. I saw your post on LinkedIn and it resonated so significantly with me, I thought I should write in and say hello. It looks as though our paths are quite similar. Accountants turned business owners looking to work with and help aspiring business owners. Without boring you, I was once a pretty average accountant. I left the trade quickly and joined a progressive building company called Johns Lyng Group, as I thought I might be able to nab some equity. I did, we grew it, and it is now a public company. I then went out to buy a business. But even though I had decent capacity, I was only 28 years old, and no one took me serious enough, and deal flow was a nightmare. I looked at search funds, but decided to get more creative and launched www.resolve.expert, a website for brokers to list small businesses for sale. The idea was that we could go back to those people who wouldn't give us deal flow and get in front of them and in front of thousands of investors, except we would cherry pick the best businesses before the market got them. Geez, it was a struggle. Launching that startup is not a period of my life that I look back on fondly. Nothing about it should be glorified, but it worked. We listed about 100 businesses and saw a few hundred more, from all the big four, the major insolvency firms, mid-tier accountants, and business brokers, and we eventually found our one, BT Engineering. I sold my shares in Resolve back to my business partner, and dare I say, I'll never return to a startup land like that ever again. BT manufactures from scratch in Sydney the sexiest tools you can imagine. Bricklaying tools. An incredibly diversified customer base, a cult-like following amongst its customers, and recurring revenue via automated systems at the major tool retailers makes it a wonderfully cash-generative business. I ran it for 2 years, launched a digital B2C sales channel in the UK and the US, and watched it grow 30% year on year. I've since employed a young gun to run it and took 12 months off to be with my wife and first child, Flynn. I had a bit of itchy feet, so I went out to buy another boring cash flow business. So I just wanted to reach out and say that having been full circle on searching, acquiring, growing and exiting small businesses, launching and exiting a startup, raising capital and securing a large transaction, and frankly, having it done alone, it would be a pleasure to be an advocate and a useful resource in any way that might be beneficial.
There you go. I was a bit worried for a moment.
Podcast is already done. So firstly, amazing story, and which today we're going to unpack. But secondly, bravo and a killer email. So where'd you learn to write like that?
Oh, well, I definitely wouldn't confess to being a good writer. I probably pored over that email for half a day at least. In fact, my wife, who's a lawyer, she proofreads anything important that I need to send out the door. So she probably proofread that for me.
That's helpful.
But, typically cold email and cold calling, I think most things that have turned out to be successful in my life have started from a cold email or a cold call.
Yeah.
I find opportunity flow, it can be a bit like a tap. The more you get out there and the more you reach out and the more you ask for meetings and the more you specifically ask for favors and requests, the more things start to happen. And that's always been the case. It takes a few months for it to sort of spool up, but it always starts coming back to you once you get in the rhythm and the flow of it. And it's amazing how fast things can happen when you start actually pounding the pavement like that. typically, I'll always try and cold call first. If I can get the details of someone, you have to cold call.
Yeah.
Especially for our generation, it sort of puts the recipient on a bit of an awkward footing from the start.
Yes.
They don't really like the phone call.
Yeah.
It makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable, and you can get further with the recipient than if you just started on an email. You can get things happening on the spot.
Yeah.
So cold calling, cold emailing, it's unsexy, it's a bit uncomfortable and awkward, but it works.
You know what, it's such an asymmetrical trade because, as you said, you're really going with the front foot and they're like, oh, well, who is this person? And if you got them on the phone especially, they feel obligated to say something, and whether that's just a no. I think most people fear doing cold calling or cold email because they're afraid of rejection or feeling like an idiot. And, especially if you feel like you're in a position to ask a favor from a stranger, there might be a perceived power dynamic if you're trying to, cold email something that, you aspire or maybe admire. But actually, a lot of people do like to receive cold emails from people who follow them. So that's awesome. And I think, even just a cold email, crafting a killer cold email is legitimately an unfair advantage. I think that is a skill that people can learn, and maybe we can do a podcast on that another day. But it can lock so many opportunities by just asking, right? And if the worst that can happen is that they're going to say no, right?
Absolutely.
And like you, I've become less afraid about doing the cold emailing or the cold calling, and it genuinely helped me in my career, for sure. So let's start from the beginning. So you cut your operating experience you're an accountant, for a period, and you mentioned that you sucked at that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Sucked at accounting, which is totally fine. But then you realised that you you got a job at Johns Lyng Group. Can you talk about what is Johns Lyng? What is that company?
Yeah, sure. So Johns Lyng, company based in Melbourne, at its core, it's a business that works for insurance companies. Okay. It's unsexy, but it's unsexy and somewhat boring, but a critical part of the insurance and construction landscape in Australia. Insurance building is what forms the core of the business. So it probably does in excess of 30,000 insurance claims every year. So anything from a hole in a wall to if a tree fell through this building right now, Johns Lyng or a company like it would come out on behalf of the insurance company and repair it to the state it once was.
Gotcha. Okay. So insurance companies would outsource so let's just say, Brisbane floods, which it has done many times over the years, all that damage, people make insurance claims with Suncorp, Amy, etc., and then they would subcontract that out to people like Johns Lyng?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's slightly different to a typical building company though, in that the primary function of an insurance builder is scalability. You have to be able to scale up thousands and thousands of building projects quite literally overnight.
Right.
So that means on the back end there's really complex, efficient IT systems, huge network of subcontractors. And so it's not so much about nailing the nail into the wall as it is having the sausage factory to be able to handle tens of thousands of claims.
Gotcha. And that becomes a self-fulfilling kind of moat for Johns Lyng, right? Because to win tenders, I assume it's a tender process with these large insurance companies, you need to be the biggest and the best because you need to ensure there's network coverage across the country, right? Yeah, or at least your state.
That's right. Every postcode in Australia within a couple of hours.
Yeah, fascinating.
So it's quite hard. And then on its, outside of the inner core, there was quite an exciting, opportunistic outer to the company. So we owned a significant portion of a company called the Retail Prodigy Group, which operated every Nike store in Australia. We had joint ventures with some insurance companies, with some consumer-facing subscription products. At one stage, we owned an esport betting platform.
What?
Lots and lots of different things.
Okay, so there was like an investment arm to the insurance building business, is that right? Or was it why would a insurance building company own part of an esports business? What's the rationale behind that?
Well, the esport one in particular was an opportunity that came up with a software developer that worked for the company. Gotcha. But really, it came back to the founding team members and Scott, the CEO in particular, a very entrepreneurial business operator, who couldn't sit still with insurance building.
Sure.
And insurance building it's not an incredibly profitable business, but it is like an annuity.
Gotcha.
So once you have that core of the business going, it just allowed the business to think outside of the box and work on other big projects.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so what was your job there? What did you do at Johns Lyng?
So I looked after the core, the unsexy part. So I ran the insurance building division, which was the vast majority of the company. So it was, $100 million plus business, a few hundred staff around the country, very fast paced and quite stressful. It's a job where you're stuck in the middle of many stakeholders. One being the insured, that's probably never lodged an insurance claim in their life and wants to reap the benefits of paying insurance for 20 years.
Yeah.
An insurance company, which are notoriously quite difficult to work for. They have a lot of pressures on themselves and the pressure gets passed down.
Yeah.
An insurance broker, and then, construction and building rules and regulations to throw in the mix. So it's fast-paced, but it's high impact. You can genuinely walk around after a flood in North Queensland and see the impact you're having on families.
Yeah.
So it's powerful in that respect, but comes with a significant amount of stress.
Yeah, it sounds like you're like just getting pressure from all angles, right? Everyone's trying to you're the guy. And you try and make money at the same time, right? Make a profit.
Yeah, exactly.
Deal with all these different stakeholders. So how did you get a job there? Like what led you to that?
So once upon a time, about half a dozen knee operations ago, I played Aussie Rules. And after I finished up playing in the VFL in Melbourne, I went to a local club to play with a friend called Greensborough, the mighty Greensborough Slime. And Scott, the CEO and majority owner of Johns Lyng, was the major sponsor. And I was connected through the footy club to Scott. Eventually, I met Scott and decided to take a job at one of the big four accounting firms. And about 18 months later, I came with my tail between my legs back to Scott and said, actually, it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. But the footy club would be a huge recruiting hotspot for us for many years to come.
Yeah. Interesting.
As well as, lots of other, of Scott and the other directors and general managers in the business, the community organisations they were involved in, that's pretty much how we referred people through the business.
Yeah, fascinating. It's funny how there's a lot of sports team analogies in business. You don't want to run business like a family. It's more akin to a sports team. And I think hiring athletes is, usually if they're paying, you're semi-professional or on the path to, there's some inner drive for competition, being better, striving for excellence. And I think that
absolutely
sounds like a common theme and sounds like it works really well for their recruitment strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the way I've run businesses has been based on something I learned during footy. I had this coach, a man called Darren Creswell. He was a fantastic bloke, quite a complicated man, and later went to jail for some financial crimes. But was always extremely nice to me. But he used to say this one saying over and over and over. And when I was playing footy, it didn't ever really stick with me. And it wasn't until I ran businesses later on that it just suited perfectly. And he used to say, as a team, we are defensively structured with an offensive mindset. And I instill that amongst all the businesses that I run, is that we get the fundamentals right. We make sure that we're defensively structured. People know what job they have to do. They have their KPIs. We are a resilient business. We're diversified. And once you have all those things in place, that allows your mindset to be offensive. Yeah. And you can be as aggressive as you like there. And a little bit like Johns Lyng, we had our core that was defensive and we had our outer, which was offensive. And I've always found it to be a fantastic way to run businesses. And probably more importantly, it's really easy to communicate that to staff. Yeah,
for sure. It's like you talk about, AFL or rugby or one of these. It's like, I get it. I get the premise. That's great. So you went from Big Four accounting firm to Johns Lyng. So day to day, you were essentially running the insurance business. How were you? It sounds like you moved up the ranks quite quickly. What was that? What was the incentive program, or how they allure you back into that? Because you could have just got a job at somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
What was the thing to get you there?
Sure. So it was an extremely compelling and exciting business to look at from the outside. Their entire growth had been created by dividing and conquering. So Johns Lyng had its head company and it had probably 30 odd subsidiaries each doing similar things, potentially in different geographies or a slightly different service offering to the market.
Yeah.
But they split everything up. And so at that point, they probably have close to 100 now, but there was about 30 at the time. And within each subsidiary, Scott and the team would identify two what he used to call rockstar up-and-comers that they'd offer 2.5% or 5% equity each to account for 5 or 10% in total.
Yeah.
And essentially let them loose. It was extremely unique, and the company had grown from turning over tens of millions to hundreds of millions within 10 years. It was not like anything I'd ever seen or heard before. The way they got these young people in was on attractive terms. It was all about getting them in as an owner, and no doubt getting their pound of flesh as a result.
Yeah.
But it was an extremely powerful mechanism that I thought, I wonder if I could maybe get some equity in one of these subsidiaries.
And they're recruiting like people from the footy, like kids
Yeah.
like you. Well, kids, how old were you at that time?
Yeah.
Like, when you started with them? Like
24, 25?
Yeah, okay. So like never run a business before.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, come in and run this business.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It was bizarre. It was really exciting. But, you know, it was probably before it started to come in vogue. They would genuinely not look at resumes. Or if they did, they might not look at names. They didn't care if you went to uni, where you went to school, what sex you were. It made absolutely no difference whatsoever. You sat down with Scott and his fellow directors, and they just had a conversation with you. And they worked out if you had the drive and the energy and the initiative, and if you wanted to make something of your life.
Wow.
And that was it.
Okay, so you dropped into one of these subsidiary companies, one of the 30, and they give you like some time to fit in, or you just like drop you in, okay, here, run a business now, off you go. Do they give you coaching, support, all that sort of stuff?
So the whole business was designed around these young people and giving them the bumper bars they need and taking all the boring stuff away from them so they can succeed.
Yeah.
So there was two main ways they did that. First of all, every month, every single business owner went through what they call a go meeting. It's a bit like an operational update, but it's more like a training session. So the go meeting would focus on teaching the business owner why net profit doesn't equal cash, for example. You know, what cash flow really is. We had one slide that a director at the time, Alan Miltz, he devised for the company that showed how a 1% change in your working capital levers, what effect that would have on the cash flow of the business. Yeah. And it was an interactive way to see how you could improve your business. We talk about customer outcomes. We talked about culture in the business. We talk about strategic goal setting, a range of different things that would, over time, teach these young people that might have been a chippy or might have been a receptionist how to be a business owner. And then secondly, we had a really killer shared services. So we took everything that they shouldn't be focusing on away from them.
Yeah.
All of finance, all of HR, all of safety. We had our own internal IT team, including a software development team that built our own ERP. All administration, everything. So these business owners, really, all they have to think about is providing the best service they can to their customer and being a leader for their staff. That's it. And then with the equity, they're empowered to go and try and take over the world. And it works. It really, really works.
That's an amazing model. Like that is awesome, but also scares me. If I was in Scott's shoes, I'm like, I'm going to hire a bunch of 20-year-olds to run my $100 million turnover insurance building business, which is not an easy business to run, I imagine. You know, you spoke about all the stakeholder pressures, but also you're functionally running a construction business, which are, I think, fairly low margin, and there's not a lot of room for error if they're planning to be profitable to loss making. That's simply incredible. So they're training you guys on the fly and giving full autonomy to make decisions within guardrails. What happened? Like what if you were partnered with? What happened to the poor performers? Like you're exceptional, obviously, through your experience, and you worked your way up. But like for the people that didn't quite cut it, how did they manage poor performance or ones that didn't quite make the fit?
Yeah, so part of that Go meeting process, what we did actually was we gamified it a little bit. So we created a point system for every slide. So if you were absolutely all over your cash flow, you might get 100 points to that slide, and every slide would have something similar. And at the end of the month, I had one of my tasks was to publish the company leaderboard. So every subsidiary would be put on a leaderboard, ranked from most points to least points, and the year-to-date summary as well. And so it was visible for the entire company which business owners were performing well and which weren't. And with that sort of transparency and visibility, the people, they manage themselves out. They realize that this isn't what they thought, it's not for them, for whatever reason they can't do it. And it wasn't cutthroat from in any way, shape or form from us. There'd be probably a number of times where the business owner might step back into a more day-to-day role and not be a business owner. And we'd find someone else to take their shoes and they'd still work within the business and there'd be no problems with that. So it wasn't this sort of, boilerplate type scenario where we're, pairing people off against each other and this, and it's sort of cutthroat. It's those issues more or less took care of themselves because of the transparency.
Yeah. It's almost, the poor performance kind of filter out just through, like, I'm consistently at the bottom. It's like, maybe this is not for me, and kind of self-selects in a way.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So did you buy in? So you were one of the 5 to 10% folks, right? Did they make you buy in with your money, or did they just gift it to you and see what happened?
So what I hoped when I arrived at Johns Lyng was that I'd get equity in one of the subsidiaries. I jumped into one subsidiary that was on a bit of shaky ground, fixed things up in reasonable fashion. Then I came back to Queensland. I did that again. Things went pretty well for me, I suppose. And I was surprised one day when they offered me equity, not just in one of the subsidiaries, but in the entire company.
Wow.
Up the top.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So with the CEO, the CFO, the
Crazy. And how old were you at that stage? Like
25.
25-year-old. Wow.
25,
Okay, so you were, they saw something in you and they're like, we need to get this guy at the top because he's working wonders with our portfolio companies.
Yeah, I suppose. It was right place, right time, and right person with the right leader. It was all the elements coming together at once to make it work for me. So yes, I had to buy in. I was very fortunate on very attractive terms, extremely attractive terms. And, as like every 25-year-old, I had enough money in my bank to basically go to the pub that weekend, and that was about it. So, buying was $300,000. Obviously, I didn't have that. And so I'll be forever thankful to the ownership team of Johns Lyng that they financed my buy-in and my dividends paid it off.
Gotcha.
So it was an incredible gesture. Looking back on it now, though, it absolutely was an incredible gesture, but I also think it was the right move.
100%.
I brought value tenfold that to the business over the time. Value that, I may not have brought if I wasn't an equity owner. I remember a lot of periods that were extremely difficult and hard work, and potentially I wouldn't have executed in those scenarios as well if I wasn't a genuine business owner. So I think it was a fantastic investment on their behalf. And I'm also extremely thankful that they made the investment as well.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, it's all about aligning incentives, right? And that's exactly what equity does in structured in the right way. I envisage you as being, I bet you have you seen Pulp Fiction? The wolf from Pulp Fiction.
That was actually my nickname.
Was it? Oh, there you go. There you go. No, I had no idea, but there you go. You're the wolf. You drop you into fires and you're just like, yep, oh, cool.
Oh, geez.
No worries. You're always thinking around corners. You're playing four-dimensional chess. So just calm down. This will get so. Simon's here. I'll save a day. That's amazing. Can you share us a story about what it was like? Maybe the worst day you had working in a company. I'm sure there's a few, or maybe the best. So,
probably the worst. The worst day that I had is easy to remember because it was also the biggest mistake I've ever made in my career.
Awesome.
So We lost a big client that I was in charge of insurance building, and we lost one of probably our biggest client. It was worth tens of millions of dollars a year. And the way that happened, cutting to the end, and I'll go back to the start, is I thought I was smarter and better than everyone else in the room. I was 25. I had unlimited youthful optimism. I was a bull in a china shop. I had, one gear, which was just getting shit done all the time. So we lost this client, and there were parts of Australia that were very heavily reliant on this. So there was a lot of staff that were affected as a result of it. And what happened was we had been performing average for this customer. And I got put into a room one day, and they said, "You need to pull up your socks, or we're going to have to think about what we do." And I thought, this will be easy. I went and got Tableau, a data visualization platform. I instilled that across the business. I had every graph and every colourful, pretty picture that you could possibly imagine to show that our performance, bottom left was all red cells, and top right was all green cells, and the line charts all went up to the top right.
To the right, yeah.
And we genuinely pulled our socks up. We were performing great, and I came into a meeting one day thinking everything was fine, and they tore the contract out.
Oh.
And it didn't make any rational sense to me at the time. I hadn't even stopped to think that there was a possibility that we wouldn't keep this contract. I thought I'd killed it. I thought my shit didn't stink, essentially. But the reason why we lost it, it was never really about the performance, is that we didn't have any relationship with the customer.
Yeah.
Which I just didn't place enough importance of at the time. So we were always losing it. We just we just killed ourselves to improve our performance, but we were never winning that contract again because we had no relationships with the decision makers, and they had already lined up the person that was going to take our spot.
Yeah.
So it was a huge learning curve for me that, and I've been asked by people in the past, advice about running a business, and most of the time these people coming to me are really intelligent people, and I say to them, just forget it. Just forget you're intelligent. Just leave it at the door. Relationships and culture are the only things that matter. That is it. The person that they replaced us with, I bet you they weren't as good as us, but they had the relationships. Yeah. They made the decision-making person feel good. They made them look good to their boss in some way, shape or form. And so they got and we didn't. It was a huge learning curve for me, something that I've had to work really hard on, but something that I was essentially banished, I suppose, to the London Business School to go and learn a little bit more about this, which was a pretty transformative time in my life. Like I said, I was 25, youthful optimism, probably a bit arrogant. Thought intelligence was going to solve every problem. And the London Business School taught me that it couldn't be further from the truth. So essentially the theme of, I studied the general management program, and the theme was essentially what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
And it was trying to transition from being a functional expert or, the 25-year-old sort of...
break through brick walls.
Workaholic.
Yeah.
To being a leader.
Yeah.
And I came back a completely different person. I started to learn about my own leadership style and how others interpret that leadership, how they might respond well to it or how they might respond negatively. I got, a part of it was 360 feedback from all my colleagues, which was,
eye-opening.
I learned situations that I'm good at and not good at, situational leadership, essentially.
Yeah.
And, I've never looked back in that regard. And probably secondly, the business was extremely fortunate to have a man called Kurt in the business. Kurt, just an, global top-tier talent. He was a head of people and talent at Nike and Limited Brands in America.
Yeah.
And he coached me one-on-one for some time, and he also introduced me to a system called the Enneagram.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The Enneagram, for anyone who's out there who's sort of done the Myers-Briggs or any of those other ones, my personal opinion, just forget all those. Just stick with the Enneagram. Absolutely love it. It's more of a holistic sort of understanding of who you are as a person, not so much a professionally focused system. And I'm constantly referring back to the Enneagram just to remind myself of things that I do when I'm unhealthy and things that I do when I'm healthy. And really, my advice to anyone out there, any sort of budding business owner, would be, if you aren't spending time to improve and learn about your own leadership and emotional intelligence, you'll never be that successful. You know, or if you're successful, you'll kill yourself on the way getting there. And you'll learn all these lessons afterwards that you could just take some time now to learn on the front end and enjoy the ride a bit more.
Yeah, the Enneagram's a really powerful tool. My wife actually introduced me to it when we started dating. I'm not sure what she was trying to teach me by reading that book. It's just, do you find yourself kind of meeting someone new and then trying to place them into a type? Like, maybe can you explain what the Enneagram is?
Sure. Yeah. So the Enneagram is a system. You're sort of given a type, a number from 1 to 9.
Yeah.
And everything's all interrelated, and you're not specifically one number. There's sort of some grey edges to it, and it covers who you are sort of professionally, who you are socially. It talks through some of your your traits when you're being unhealthy or healthy. So for me, my type, I'm a type 3. When I'm unhealthy, I start to feel like I'm worthless if I'm not successful. And I can spiral really quickly. If I don't feel like I'm, I'll benchmark all of my peers subconsciously, and I'll see where I am in the pecking order. And if I don't feel like I'm near the top and I'm being successful, then I start to feel I don't have any self-worth.
Sure.
And so knowing that is extremely powerful. I know that I can be extremely motivating to other people when I'm being healthy. I know that I can provide compelling narratives. I can be inspirational at times. But I also know that I can go step 1, 2, 3, 10.
Yeah.
And, plenty of people want to talk through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When you start to get to know the Enneagram, you do start walking around seeing everyone as numbers a little bit, and sort of trying to interpret how you should best interact with that person.
Yes. Yeah.
So auditors or IT professionals tend to be number 5s, and
that's the analyst one, right? Is that the
investigator?
The investigator. Yeah.
They hate being put on the spot. So if I was to go to an IT professional with a tricky question, I'd go over and say, before I became more self-aware, I would just go over and ask him on the spot and demand an answer. Now I would go over and say, I have a tricky question for you. These are the things I want you to think about. I'm going to come back in 24 hours and can we have a discussion about it? And then if we need more time after that, we'll meet again. So simple, so easy. That person feels comfortable. I'll get my answer. Everyone's happy.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's been a while since I read the Enneagram thing, and did the test, because I actually think sometimes, I don't know if it's true or not, I did the Myers-Briggs, and I felt that I would be on 1 or 2 types. But I think I'm an 8 for the Enneagram. Is that the control freak one?
That's right. Yeah.
I think so. That definitely the business person of me is definitely the 8, but there's an adventurer one, I think, which is maybe it's a 6 or a different. I can't remember which number it was. I find myself, like, in a social setting, I'm not often the control person, but in a business setting or professional setting, I can be that person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it has pros and cons. I've actually found that you're top 3, right?
That's right.
I think type 3s and type 8s are typically people in business or entrepreneurs. It's just what I've researched. Warren Buffett was actually the analyst one. I think it's number 4.
Okay.
So not the entrepreneur one, but when you do study it, you start to put people in buckets. I found myself doing that. My wife is a different type, and I started to read when I went down the rabbit hole of, like, how do we interact, and if she's in a bad mood, like, how should I approach?
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually it's wonderful. It's a wonderful system. That's super fascinating. But first, a quick message from our sponsor. Are you tired of traditional accounting firms that only focus on tax and compliance? Looking for a financial partner that can go beyond the numbers and reveal the story those numbers are telling? SBO Financial aren't your typical business accountants. We're your dedicated financial management team, empowering you to take control of your finances and gain clarity and confidence in your business. Sure, it will keep your books in order and file your taxes. But unlike traditional firms, we'll also go beyond financial hygiene to give you the forward-looking insights and strategies you need to grow your cash and profitability. Picture this: a team of chartered accountants, CPAs, bookkeepers, payroll specialists, and financial analysts all working together to help you grow your business. With SBO, you gain access to a collective team of experts and specialists, providing you with proactive advice and analysis. So don't settle for reactive advice. Stop looking backwards and start looking forwards with SBO Financial, your partner in financial management and growth. Visit our website or contact us today for a free financial health check at sbo.financial. Okay, so Johns Lyng, you're on the board of directors, you've got equity in the company, they sent you to London Business School, it's been a transformative career experience for you, but you're no longer there. What happened?
Yeah, so look, I was about 29 at the time, and my main motivation has always been to make my mark on something of my own. I've always just wanted to make sure that no matter what, at the end of the day, I'm extremely content that I had to go by myself and, I achieved something successful and that I was proud of myself. And so as I got closer to 30, I thought now's probably the time to go out by myself, pre-kids, pre-marriage, all those sorts of things, and really try and make a mark myself. So add in there a lot of impatience and again, sort of naive, youthful optimism that everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And that was my decision-making process, really. It was just stuff it, let's just go have a crack. I did have to make peace. I was making a pretty significant amount of money at the time, and I had to make peace with that. I also knew at some stage that Johns Lyng would sell the business, likely float, and that would bring a significant more amount of money.
Yeah.
But I mean, don't get the tissues out for me, because I exited for about 7 figures. I was totally fine.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic period of my life. But yeah, I left a lot of money on the table, a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think Johns Lyng, that's a listed company now. I think they listed 7 years ago or so. Maybe not long after you left. But the share price has gone like 30% year on year, I think.
Yeah.
CAGR, it's a big it's $1 billion business, basically.
Yeah.
But you left for different reasons, not money, right? By the sound
That's right.
of it. So so what did you do next?
Yeah, so I wanted to buy a business of my own.
Yeah.
So I went out. I had some capacity after exiting Johns Lyng, but I was 29 and I just couldn't get deal flow. No one would take me serious, despite me telling them that I had capacity to buy the business. I was just this young punk kid, sort of trying to get meetings with brokers and accountants and lawyers.
Gotcha. Corporate, the big wigs at Big Four and BDO, they're like, who are you guys trying to buy a business? Piss off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I got nowhere. That probably lasted 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
When we had a bit of a creative idea to try something different. At the time, must have been just after Stanford published their first search fund report that everyone started reading.
Yeah.
As well as the Bible, the HBR book, How to Grow a Small Business.
Yeah.
I started thinking about search funds, but we had an idea to be a bit more creative than that. And so myself, my brother, and my friend decided to put our heads together, and we essentially came up with a marketplace for small businesses to buy and sell. We wanted to be the realestate.com.au of small businesses on the internet.
Gotcha.
In the same way that houses were once on the shop front of real estate agencies and they went to the internet, we wanted to take small businesses and put them on the internet.
Yeah.
So very, very fortunately, my brother's a software engineer. He built a platform for us. And myself and my friend Ed, we got to pounding the pavement. So all the accountants and lawyers and brokers that wouldn't take a meeting for us, all of a sudden would take our meeting because we had an online platform for them to help sell their businesses.
All right.
It was, like any startup, extremely difficult. 10 to 20 times harder than I ever thought it was going to be at the start. But in the end, it was successful. So we ran the business for I was involved with the business for about 2 years. We listed about 100 small businesses for sale. We got them from some of the big four, all the big four, all the major insolvency, lots of brokers, accountants, some lawyers, even some direct listings from families themselves. And the idea always was that we would cherry pick the business that we liked most for ourselves.
That's awesome.
And once that was done, the platform had served its purpose, and we could decide whether we wanted to continue on with it from then.
So that's a really funny strategy, because I think you went through on the search fund route, and typically what that looks like is you might raise some capital, or you were probably self-funded because you had a bit of money from your exit. But you were trying to develop relationships with business brokers. They wouldn't take you seriously because of your age and whatever. The first door's not working, so knocking on the door, I can't get in. The second door might be direct outreach to business owners, but as you know, that can be a very time-consuming, laborious process, which can get you nowhere very quickly. So that's the second door. But you opened the third door, which was, hey, I'm going to almost build a Trojan horse to get me to the table to deal flow, and you did that through building that marketplace, Resolve, right? That's the company, right? So you build a marketplace for business owners to list, or brokers to list their business, and then hopefully that would attract enough attention from buyers of businesses to then go. But really, so that could have been, that's still business now, right? Like Resolve, that's still business today. But really, your true intent was to cherry pick the off-market deal flow coming through the platform.
That's right.
To find the business, which is simply incredible. Like, was such a creative way to get deal flow, and it worked.
Yeah,
in the end,
it
right?
worked. Yeah. We found our dream little business called BT Engineering.
Yeah,
and that was probably 2 years into the piece. And so after I exited Johns Lyng, it was about 7 figures by the time you paid an eye-watering amount of tax. I was having a bit of fun in the meantime, some cost to launch Resolve. The money starts, it's amazing how fast your bank account reduces when you have no money coming in.
Yes.
Especially at that age. So, it was starting to get a little bit hairy. But we found BT just in the nick of time, where we still had enough financial capacity to buy the business.
Yeah. Self-funded. You didn't raise any money?
No, didn't raise any money.
Awesome.
Yeah. It was an extremely exciting time of my life.
That's wild. That's so crazy. So tell us about BT. What did you like about BT? Because you would have been scouring hundreds, potentially thousands of businesses. Why was BT special to you?
Yeah, the first thing that jumped out at me. So BT Engineering is a manufacturing business in Sydney that manufactures power tools and hand tools for bricklayers. I'll be the first to admit, I thought a bricklayer had a trowel and string line, but turns out they don't. And that's largely due to BT, who have 60 years of inventing bricklaying tools for Aussie bricklayers.
Wow.
So when I came across BT, the first thing that jumped out at me was that they have a cult status. And I tell people at barbecues, people talk about BT, bricklayers talk about BT rather, in the same way that computer boffins talk about Apple. There's this sort of, they feel a part of the business, like they've helped it grow themselves. And it really is true in BT. So BT, over 60 years of family ownership, invented all these hand tools that help bricklayers be more efficient. And as a result, actually, Aussie bricklayers are, without a doubt, the most efficient, accurate bricklayers in the world. That's largely because of this small business.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
So the tools are empowering brickies to be more efficient.
That's right.
And essentially make more money, right? Because
exactly.
brickies are paid per output.
Per brick.
Yeah, per brick.
Yeah.
So what's a brick tool? What tools does BT sell? Like, what is the thing? Like,
Sure.
I'm sure sells a variety of stuff, but what?
So simplistically, back in the day, traditional bricklaying is laying a brick, reaching for a spirit level, putting the spirit level on, checking the brick is level, tap, 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 everything's fine, putting the spirit level back. That little process takes 15 to 20 seconds per brick. And a bricklayer will lay hundreds of bricks a day. So the equation of saving time is extremely simple to work out. BT's tools take 5 minutes to set up on each corner of the house and allows you to run a string line from one corner to the next. And you lay the bricks to that string line, never reaching for your spirit level, saving 10 to 15 seconds every time you lay a brick.
Yeah.
it's an absolute no-brainer. But BT make extraordinarily high-quality tools. These tools will genuinely, if you look after them, last the career of a bricklayer. And the power tools we make, big brick cutting machines and block and paving cutter machines, they'll last at least 10 years. It's the sort of old school quality that you just don't get anymore.
Yeah.
The big players that have factories throughout Asia, their products are all primarily light gauge aluminium or plastic, and they're almost throwaway toys. BT has just stuck with what they know works, and the bricklaying community has responded with loyalty for decades and decades.
It's amazing. So did you know this cult status when you found, like, did you know what BT was as a brand and you're like, oh, wow, I did the business for sale, or did you have to do research and figure it out yourself?
Never heard of it. I don't think anyone had really heard of this business.
No. Outside the brick industry.
Yeah. Flew under the radar, but was the dominant player in its own little niche.
Yeah.
So my first bit of research was Scuttlebutt. I was living in Sydney at the time, in Manly, and I was walking down the Esplanade at Manly, and there was some landscapers who had a BT brick saw, and I just walked over to them.
Yeah, awesome.
I said, my dad's a bricklayer and he needs a Christmas present. Can you tell me about this saw?
How good.
And they just went off. Yeah. Oh, it's the best. You've got to get it. Don't worry about all the rest. Rah, rah, rah. Yeah. I thought, great, we're off to a good start. And I confirmed that multiple different ways. And so ultimately came to the conclusion that, first of all, BT had a cult status.
Yeah.
And being in business for 60 years, it was obvious that they had, inertia that couldn't really be slowed down. The second thing I really liked about it was it had remained profitable despite all the offshoring over the last 20 to 30 years. When everyone else went to China and other parts of Asia, Vietnam now, they had stuck in Australia and they were still quite a profitable business. It was clear that they were able to increase prices with no real effect to volume.
Yeah, so pricing power.
Pricing power, yeah. An enormously powerful lever that they had at their disposal.
Yeah, and so you could get conviction on the pricing power, and it usually is the cult status. So it's the brand. It's like Apple products. Apple is a luxury brand that sells software and technology. BT is a luxury brand for brickies, right?
Yeah.
So you can increase prices, doesn't change volume because people, in fact, it might have the opposite problem. Like, cool, it's expensive, but it's worth it, right? It almost reinforces that brand narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool.
The way we came about BT while we were running Resolve was that it was actually a little newspaper advertisement in the corner of the newspaper.
Classifieds or something.
Yeah. And
that still exists nowadays, that whole section?
I think a few people still do it, to be honest. It's more, I think they do it just to tick a box that they've gone to market.
Gotcha, yeah.
I reached out. They had
to the broker, or was it to the owners themselves?
It was to the family's personal accountant.
Gotcha. Okay.
And started to get to know them a little bit. They were they were the son and daughter of the founder who had been running it, Beck and Jen, and they themselves had no children to pass the business on to. That wanted the business.
Yeah.
And they were really looking for someone that would genuinely look after their legacy and look after what had just been the central, figure in their entire lives, which was the business.
Yeah.
The process to buy the business I'd describe as slow and loose. It took a long time. Buying businesses, I've since learned, always takes a lot of time, and this took a pretty significant amount of time. Primarily because it's an emotional process. If you go into buying small businesses thinking that that you're across the mechanics and how to analyse,
look through a business through a spreadsheet.
Yeah, sure. It's not the most important part.
Yes.
The most important part, if you want to buy quality businesses, is vendor management.
Yeah.
Which is getting to know the vendor, understanding what they need, understanding what their fears are about letting go of their business, and selling to them that you're the right person to maintain their legacy. And so I built up some rapport with the owner, probably over 6 to 12 months, and I explained to them that I'd like to buy your business. Theoretically, I will never sell it. I'd like to make small improvements over a long period of time. I will be respecting what made this business great and trying to add to that in my own way, and keeping things simple along the way. So we wouldn't be offshoring manufacturing. We would be keeping all the staff employed. And ultimately, we bought the business at a bit over 2 times EBITDA for about $1 million.
Yep.
They had much higher offers from, private equity types and trade players, much, much higher types. But ultimately, the vendor didn't believe that they would protect the legacy as much as I would.
Yes.
And so I was the fortunate beneficiary.
That's wonderful. So you look the vendor in the eye, hand on heart, like, here are my intentions with your baby.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tack it on bolt it on to my big mothership, platform asset. I'm not going to flip it in 7 years and load it up with debt. I think you were genuine and authentic with your offer.
Yep.
Which goes to show it's for the owners that care what happens next, right?
That's right.
I think that's probably the difference with buying these businesses that are a bit older, or the business has been a foundation to the family, as you mentioned. Put the kids through private school, create a great, being a great financial asset to the family where it is their baby, and they want to really care about where it goes to next. They haven't got any options except to sell it, and they want to make sure it goes into good hands, and that matters more than price a lot of the time, which I think a lot of people just optimize on price. And I think that if a young person was selling their business, I've always fantasized about selling my my business because they can be headaches sometimes, but you always fantasize about it. And if I was to sell, it's always about, it has to be this price to be worth it, right? It's always about the money. But for people at that age, they've probably already made their money, right?
Yeah.
Well, they're already well off because the business has been a great business for the entire life. It's about, okay, I want to make sure it goes to a good home as opposed to the dollar at the back.
Exactly right.
That's so good. So do you remember what your first conversation was like? You mentioned about vendor management. What was that first early conversation with the vendors themselves? Like, you call them up or do you email them? It's like, hey, I saw your business for sale. What happens next?
Yeah. Basically, I remember meeting them for coffee. I can't remember if it was exactly the first time. I remember them meeting for coffee, and the first questions are, back to what we said before, is really, what are you going to do to my baby? And I think I probably said something along the lines of, less is more. It's a successful business for many decades. Why would I touch what's made it successful? And again, with people asking me advice about buying businesses, again, intelligent people, I say, doing nothing is doing something. Yeah. Don't feel like you just have to get busy and just start pulling levers or, start changing the way they've operated. It probably works fine. It might not be perfect. It might not be super efficient. Maybe there's a bit of paper involved. Just don't worry about it. Just, go and talk to your customer, talk to your staff, over-communicate there, and just let things unfold and be patient. Because you can very quickly undo decades of good work. So I would have explained something like that to him. Yeah.
So if I was in your shoes buying a brick tool manufacturing business, you're not a tradie. By the sound of it, it sounds like your brother's an engineer, but like maybe there's a bit in your blood, but you're not an engineer by trade. Is that frightening? Like buying a small manufacturing business, which is completely potentially outside of your skill set. How do you feel? Particularly, a lot of these small businesses are fairly fragile, and they're key persons. Sometimes the owners are the technicians. Like, how do you bridge that expertise?
I think it would be frightening if you were scared of really working hard and doing anything that needed to be done in the business.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. I just wanted to work all the time.
Yeah.
I worked 15 hours a day, and I just wanted to understand how everything worked. I wanted to know how the machines worked. I wanted to know how the tools were made. And so it didn't scare me at all. It was definitely the most exciting time of my life. I think if you were going into a business and you would need to ask yourself, am I truly willing to put on steel caps and go and do this job all day, every day, should I need to?
Yeah.
If the answer is no, don't go anywhere near it.
Yeah.
Because small businesses they're extremely fragile, and it's likely something will happen that you'll have to go and do the service or make the product that's required.
So you learn how to make the tools.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you learn every single machine. Yeah.
I know more about, how Johns Lyng presses work, or programming robots and sitting on a mill or a drill press. I can do pretty much everything in that business.
That's crazy.
And when I bought it, it was of the size that you would need to. Now we're a bit bigger, and we've employed some mechanical engineers and some specialists in that regard. But back then, it was just you figure it out, or if something happens, are you willing to shut the roller door and walk away?
Yeah,
pretty simple equation.
Especially you've got personally guaranteed bank debt against the acquisition, against your name. You've put a big chunk of financial capital into that sort of thing. Yeah, it's daunting.
Yeah, that's right. But I am often asked by really intelligent people that same question, and I tell them, don't overthink it. It's mundane. It can be mundane. It can be unsexy. It almost definitely is going to be hard work.
Yeah.
If you can give into that and accept that, and be willing to do what's needed, you'll be successful. I've been asked that question by some friends who, very intelligent lawyers and bankers and accountants, and I sort of look at them and think, I don't know, your job is technical. This is not technical. This is improving 1% every day on things that aren't rocket science, and compounding that 1% every single day without failure.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was, I work 6 days a week, 12 to 15 hours a day. I loved every minute of it. And after a year or two, you look back and you go, wow, I can't believe how far we've come.
Yeah.
It's amazing how quickly it gets away from you.
I love that. And I think that where that comes from for people who are, bankers, lawyers, accountants who maybe obsess or dream of buying a business like BT, I think they look at, well, this business, it's done $500,000 of EBITDA for the last 30 years. If we, turn on some Google ads, or we'll refresh the website, we're going to get more conversion rates. It's going to boost sales by 10%. That's going to realize 20% of EBITDA, and it's going to realize all this in your enterprise value. So they're looking at levers in the business as opposed to getting in there and understanding, actually Google ads make no fucking difference to sales. It's actually going and pounding the pavement or working with distributors or building relationships, which is how you actually preserve the brand, making sure that we're transitioning management. And then you can start to do the sexy stuff later.
That's right. Yeah.
But over a slow period of time, I think people just get impatient.
That's right.
They watch all these YouTube videos, or they think, we're just going to get rid of the fax machine and implement the internet, and things will just transform.
That's right. The hardest thing about executing is not, the fancy operating model you might be trying to implement. It's about doing it over a long period of time.
Yeah.
That's what kills people.
Yeah.
If you can do it for 3 to 5 years, I almost guarantee that you'll come out the other side a successful business owner that'll probably be paying you a good salary, and you won't be working in the business.
Yeah.
But most people can't punch out 6 days a week, 12 hours a day for 3 to 5 years.
It's a slog.
It's a slog.
Yeah.
It's extremely difficult and stressful.
Yeah.
But the reward's on the other side.
You look stressed. So who's running BT right now?
I'm very fortunate. Myself and my business partner, we have a young gun called George, he's a mechanical engineer. He was, back to the sort of people we'd hire at Johns Lyng. Wants to be the master of his own destiny. Wants to make a name for himself. And finds working in a small business far more enjoyable than slogging it away at a big corporate.
Yeah. So, do you find him at the footy club as well? Or?
I don't think he's a footy player, but I think I had a recruiter for that one.
Yeah, nice. That's epic. So what are you working on now?
Right now, I'm essentially trying to repeat the BT playbook. Yeah. I'm a bit older and a bit wiser for it as well. So really what I'm out there looking for is any business owner or any family that operates that owns a business that genuinely wants to find someone who will look after their business, preserve their legacy, and continue to build on the success that they already have, I'm looking to be the purchaser of that business.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for a small to mid-sized industrial, manufacturing, B2B type business that can essentially be doing close to anything.
Yeah.
It's the joy for me in business ownership is not so much the widget that is made or the service that's offered. It's the organism of the business itself, and it's working within the business and leading people and setting goals, and somewhat addicted to the process of improvement. I'm out there looking for another acquisition.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Well, if anyone listening to this has a business for Simon, do feel free to reach out. Where can people find you, Simon?
Just LinkedIn is easiest. Yeah, Simon Plummer on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
My contact details are there. Please connect with me. I'd love to chat to anyone. And any questions out there for people, aspiring to be a business owner, please, let me know.
Yeah, and if there was one parting message that you could, for people who maybe like me, who have loved the idea of buying a small business, maybe I'm in a corporate job or I'm in a C-suite somewhere, I'm going through maybe a midlife crisis, decided I want to make my own mark and destiny on my own destiny. What advice would you have for people who may want to explore this entrepreneurship to acquisition or buying a small business?
Without trying to cut anyone down, I think it's really important you go and find some business owners and have some really good, deep conversations with them about their experience and about how growing the business has been for them. Because I think they'll get a very different response to what they think. There's a really strong narrative out there at the moment, particularly with the rise of entrepreneurship through acquisition and search funds and all this lying flat nonsense about small business ownership is apparently some sort of freedom and cash flow nirvana where we're all just deciding on the day if we want to play golf or go to the beach, and it honestly couldn't be any further from the truth. I'd say 99% of small businesses are extremely stressful, at a minimum at times, and sometimes for very, very long periods of time. My experience at BT, I was once an accountant. I'm no schmuck with numbers, but cash flow and managing cash flow is extremely stressful.
Yeah. With
all the youthful optimism you might have, and you can do all these things in the business. You can bust your backside, and many times it just doesn't work out for you. And so 1 minute, everything's going great. The next minute, it's 2 a.m. and you think you're going to vomit from the stress of making payroll that week. It can be DNA-altering, soul-crushing stress. And again, I'm not trying to put anyone off small business ownership. It can be absolutely fantastic and extremely rewarding, but you have to spend time to understand who you are, what you want in life, and understand if things are going mediocre, are you still going to enjoy being a small business owner? For me, it's easy. I handle stress well. I'm genuinely a very calm person. I can think through things. So I manage that aspect fine. And I'm also, I love leadership. I constantly see people in the media think they deserve a pat on the back for employing people. I think leadership is a privilege, not a burden. I love the process of improvement, setting goals for people, seeing them achieve it. I love creating a workplace that people like coming to, that fits in with their lives. It's an extremely privileged position to be a business owner, one that I love, and that enjoyment I get definitely gets me through when things aren't going well. So get out there, pound the pavement, find some business owners, talk to them, understand their experience, really learn what it's like to be an actual day-to-day Australian business owner first, and then make your decision.
Wonderful words. Thank you, Simon. Thanks for joining, and it's been awesome.
Yeah, cheers. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed that chat with Simon. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Stark Naked Numbers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. To learn more about the secrets of uncovering your financials, unlocking your cash, and unleashing your profits, visit starknakednumbers.com and follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Jason Andrew, and this has been the Stark Naked Numbers podcast.